Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Glad you could take some time out of your day. I'm Olivia Pacha, and I'm from Washington, Iowa. I work at Premier One Supplies. So if you guys are in the sheep and goat world or you see all that electronet everywhere, I work full-time on their farm. And then I've got some cattle, sheep, and goats of my own that I run. And then I also help my dad out some when I can on his farm. So I hope this is worth the hour of your day. This is just kind of, I'll do some of the programs I'm involved in, lessons I've learned. I've learned a lot of them. And then some different grazing arrangements that I've been involved in. I think something I've learned this year is, or last year, is you can kind of be pretty creative, and a lot of people are going to be receptive to that. So I'll go through the livestock I have first. I have my guard dog, Juno. She's a Maremma. She stays with my goats. She's very wiggly, so I didn't get a very good picture of her. And then Timber is my border collie. I just bought him in December, so he's not quite ready yet, but he's really doing a great job of kind of learning the basics, and he should make my life a lot easier once I can get him trained. I've got 36 cows, 28 ewes. I'm lambing now, and then 35 goats. So I rent. My goats stay at my dad's farm, so they kind of float around to the different pastures we have. So I rent 125 acres about for my cows that are just a mile away from where I live. I have a patch rented for my sheep, and then a couple row crop patches that just corn and soybeans. So I'll just kind of go over my pastures, some of the problems I have with them, some of the advantages and disadvantages of how they are. So this pasture, this is where I put my cows. Over here, I hope you can see my mouse. Over by the house, this smaller patch, there's a little lot there, so it's nice. I have automatic water. I have my calves there that are on feed right now. And this lot is split in two. So I've got some heifers there as well. And then the heifers will get kicked out to this small patch off to the east of the house. So there's some timber in here. This patch, I guess, that north half produces very well, I'd say. The south half is not as good. But the main thing is I have two access points to those waters. So it really helps to be able to split so I'm not having trails that I'm using constantly throughout the season. The cows can have to get flipped back and forth. Across the road here, there's one waterer right across the driveway of this house, which is kind of tricky because the creek that's here, I've only rented this for a year. The creek that's here, I think last year would have been fine if I wanted to rotate stuff. But the creeks, I think, would be a dry creek in a drier year. And not really run good water. A lot of it was, even last year when we had a good amount of rain, fairly stagnant. And then the west half of this portion, we took some hay off of. And then I let the cows in there every so often. It was nice for calving because this was a much more wide open area. You can imagine checking cows 2 or 3 times a day when you have all these trees along the edges for cows to hide in, and they were not trimmed very well for my height. So the water is the main problem. So they basically ended up continuous grazing this area. So I'd like to figure out a way to rotate them this coming season. This is where my cows overwintered. It was kind of nice because this fence along the road didn't get put in until July. So there was lots of growth for me to come on to. Again, we took some hay off of the west portion here. You can see there's those 2 big ponds. Those are nice. This used to be a quarry, so it's very rocky, which helps kind of keep the pond structure, I think, so the cows don't really wreck them. There's a nice creek in there. In the far west portion, there's 2 corrals. That works nice for sorting stuff, as well as this winter, I would roll 2 bales out in the pasture, and I could I put 1 bale in each portion of the corral, and I could just move a bale ring, so I could feed them feed my cows for about 6 days 6 days at a time, kind of. And eventually, when we had a real cold snap in February, I had 2 bale rings over there, so I had feed for over a week ready to go for the cows. So all I had to do was move the bale rings. This is where I have my sheep. There's not a whole lot to this. The great part about this, I'll talk about this lease more later that I had. The perimeter here was all sheep and goat fence, which is nice because you're not going to find that a lot of places where it's reliable for that. So I just had my sheep over here, took a cutting off the west portion, a cutting of hay, and then I was able to graze that again in the fall. So I'll get into more, dig into the species. So I have 16 spring calving cows and 20 fall calvers. I have the fall calvers for the most part, come from the fact that I purchased people's late spring cows. So that kind of bulked up my fall calving herd. I do like the fall calves, other than in this picture, you can see the amount of flies on this cow. So that's a big downfall of fall calving versus spring calving. But the weather is also much more predictable and typically nicer. So the fall calving's nice, other than for the flies, basically. So yeah, we went over, cut off portions of both of the large pastures for winter, and then I just fed that right back to the cows when they ran out of corn stalks and the stockpile grazed I had. And then I just had 20% protein tubs in addition. And then later on in the season, once I quit, my dad had the idea of, as the ground thaws, if it's going to be super muddy, let's move the hay bales down to the quarry, because this is a pain to put step-in posts in because it's so rocky underneath. But when they were fed down in that quarry area, didn't have to worry so much about getting stuck in the tractor or just making a mess of everything. So I went to this kind of grid arrangement and kind of bale grazed. So again, I just had 2 bale feeders down there. I would roll them to the next bale as the cow's finished. And then I had a fence put up around the remaining bales. And this worked really nicely, or it still is. I'm still feeding some hay. The cows are trying to graze the pasture down as it's popping right up. In addition to this, there is a neighboring cornfield that I grazed in November. This was a lesson on being overly ambitious. I thought, man, I'll get out there and I'll strip graze them into the corn stalks, and every weekend I can move them. And I did that a few times, and then we got an ice storm and I never really got back out there. So I probably, if I would have just let them out and let them have the whole thing, I would have been much better off instead of just planning on having the time. So I guess a hard lesson for me is being like, know what I'm actually going to have time for and be a little more realistic of what I can accomplish. These are my goats. They are just a hodgepodge mix. Yeah, there's several dwarfs. That was the first group I bought. And they're actually very nice they do a great job of taking care of their babies. They have their babies, they stay fat, and they're just ready to rock and roll. This year, or I guess this past year, we got into grazing our cattle pastures more, and they did great. We had them graze it down to the nub, and our goats have never looked better. Their coats were nice and shiny, and the grass that grew back was really great for the cows. Juno, she's not in this picture. I would say I was a little scared. When you have a guard dog, you kind of don't want to socialize them too much. I probably erred on the side of way too little socialization. She's happy to see my dad and I, but other than that, she still barks at people that come, and we really can't catch her very well. We usually have to get her into this little corral area that the goats are in that you can see, and then kind of corner her. But she's not aggressive or anything. She's just a nervous dog. And then my ewes, I bought these from Premier One. These are Katahdin mainly. You can see there's still some wool in some of those ewes in that picture. But my main, I produce grass-fed lamb from them. The biggest problem I had with those lambs is parasites. They just got wrecked last summer. And I thought I was moving them every day, every other day. And they still lost quite a few from that, which again was a hard lesson. You don't want to learn lessons that way, but I now know for this year that I got to be on it and got to be definitely going to have to use wormers at maybe before weaning and throughout the year. But definitely keep track of those lambs that are thriving without wormers or dewormers, and keep track of those ewes that are producing those lambs. So in this picture, I'm grazing. This was kind of my first contract grazing job. So instead of like a cash payment, he said, hey, his sister is going to do advertising for me, and she's in our area, very well known for that. So that's one flexible way of doing services like this is, no, I didn't get cash for it, but this way I'll get advertising, which should hopefully pay off in the future. And this was actually a really great pasture. There was a lot of hairy vetch in there. So I had my lambs and goat kids over there. And yeah, they went to town on it, and they did really great on it. You can see they really love this grapevine. They took that down to nothing pretty quick. My ewes come in like 6 weeks prior to lambing, and then 1 month after. They get corn and soy hulls, and then they're on just a dry alfalfa bale or an alfalfa blend. So I weaned them. I think I weaned the lambs at 2.5 months probably. And yeah, the ewes did very well. I was a little nervous just the first year of how they would do on grass for that last month of lactation, but they did really well, and they bounced back. I started lambing again on Saturday. So they did really well. They bounced back, and they got most of them came back pregnant. So I was very happy with how they did. And then in the orchard, that's where they went after the families were on the hay for the month. They went to a neighboring orchard, and that worked really well. It was nice to have the trees for shade. I was a little nervous that they would eat the leaves and the branches. And they would have. There was a time they got out and they were nibbling on leaves as I was trying to get them back in. But that's another kind of a flexible agreement I've had as far as kind of a rental type deal. In that I was getting a good area to graze with a nice fence around it. And it worked out great because the other people, or the people owning the orchard, didn't have to mow the portion that I grazed off. The problem with that, trying to put electronet up between all those trees was kind of a pain. They're in a grid pattern, but it still wants to sag one way or the other, and you don't want to leave a big patch of grass. So that was kind of something to figure out for this year, is how to make that a little neater. So yeah. So overall, I'd like to discontinue dewormers in my flock and goat herd. I just think in my lifetime, that's really not going to be, dewormers aren't going to be a very great option. And it's also just expensive for the dewormers, as well as just, it takes for the facility. I don't have the handling facilities to be able to do a lot of this stuff for one person. So when it takes two people to do a job like deworming that could be avoided by rotationally grazing, then I'd like to go after that. Rotating paddocks every 2 to 3 days is my ideal kind of timeline. I don't know that especially now while I'm working for full time, it's not something I think is very achievable for me to do that once a day. So 2 to 3 days, year-round grazing, through cover crop stockpile grazing, and just kind of selecting animals that can thrive on that system. I'd like to pasture lamb and kid. I'm a big believer in just getting animals kind of out of confinement. You can see where the goats are right now. That bedding's I mean, it's pretty dry, but they're still it's still kind of dirty. And if I can just get things out on fresh grass and or cover crops or rye this time of year, I would rather do that. And I'd also like to contract graze more than I am. That's not something that people do in my area. And I think I think once people kind of start to see how big of a difference goats and even the sheep have their place in contract grazing as well, that they'll be able, or it'll be nice to see, like, to show people what they can accomplish. So I'll go over some grazing agreements now. You can see in this picture the orchard. So that would have been, I think, that would have been in July probably. I had to pull them off by the end of July just for the I guess for the guidelines on when livestock needs to be out, because those nuts drop on the ground. It's they do a variety of nuts and some fruits there. So yeah, I had to get the sheep out of there. So there's your typical cash rent. That's what I use for my cattle. So that's just, if you look up, I just use Iowa State. They have a cash rent map for pastures, row crops, whatever. So that's kind of your run of the mill if you need to know. For those larger pastures and for cattle, that's very traditional. Adjusted cash rent, that would be like in my sheep pasture that I was showing you, there was no water. So in all of these, well, in all the places I graze my sheep and goats this year, I had to haul water, which is kind of a pain. Obviously, for anybody that's done that knows it's not ideal, but it's just kind of one of the trade-offs you have. So at that Brighton pasture, I didn't have water, and it just needed some work. It hasn't been occupied. There's a house there and some buildings. It hasn't been occupied for quite a while. So there's just a lot of junk everywhere. So I told part of the, so it was, I think I started at a base price of $55 an acre. And I said, hey, I need to haul water and I'll do some cleanup while I'm here. So I ended up at $35 an acre. So that that fed my, my ewes, my lambs at the end of the season, and I got quite a bit of hay off of it as well. And I kind of enjoy doing that kind of thing where to kind of pick things up, and the livestock can kind of help you with that. I would just try to follow up behind them and pick up just simple things like trash and stuff that I could put in piles and get rid of. Exchanges, so that would be like what I did with the sheep, and then I brought my lambs and goat kids over there later. So he said, hey, do you want to do more of this contract grazing? And I said, absolutely. And so his sister is going to do some advertising for me. So I was very comfortable with that arrangement. Just kind of a service, is this orchard grazing. I'm getting free forage out of it, and they're not having to mow that area. And then work this year, the same neighbor that has the orchard, we're gonna work something out so that after they take their small grain crop off, we're gonna take the cows through there and either do a cover crop or a swath grazing, I think is what I'm leaning towards. I just kind of have to work with her on, she's organic, so kind of making sure I'm following those guidelines as well. And I think the biggest thing with all of these is like really communicating with whoever you're working with. And again, they're going to be super flexible. You're working toward, both of you have an interest and both of you can complete the goal together. So yeah, just work with them. So these are all, just because I work at Premier, I just end up using pretty much everything I think I use is from Premier. And it's right here. It's what I grew up with, as well as like I use these products every day at work, and I really don't have any gripes with them. So for the goats, the skid loader with a brush mower on the front of it was our best friend to get those weeds knocked down. Some of them were 5 or 6 feet tall. So Excuse me. So that was great to make a path for the net. Electro stop is what we use for the goats. So that's 42 inches tall rather than the 35 inches for sheep. Step-in posts, these ones that I have in the picture is what I use. When I rotate my cows, I just put the twine on the top rung. If I had calves, I'm tempted this year because I have some younger calves that are going to be rotated to put another wire on just so with the newborns, just so they're not getting separated from mom and anything too quick. When they're older, I don't worry about it so much just because they're not going to venture far away from mom. As long as my perimeter fence is in good shape, I'm not too worried about that. The IntelliBraid twine, that tightens really well. It doesn't, I do, between each of my step-in posts, I do about 12 steps. I think I could stretch it further if I wanted. But that twine comes in a 1/4 mile roll. So, it's nice to be able to go that far. And it tightens well. It's not going to sag. And yeah, it takes fewer posts to keep it held up. And then obviously I need a solar energizer for all of this stuff. I get those at Premier as well. So yeah, with this Electronet, I guess if you're not familiar with it, I think it's about every other horizontal line on that is electrified. So this is electrified, and the sheep and goats learn pretty quick that they shouldn't touch it. So these are all the supplies. I got the grazing infrastructure cost share last year, or maybe, yeah. I guess it was 2 years ago. So I got a whole bunch of Electronet. I got different types, step-in posts, fiberglass posts, the twine, rope, energizers, water de-icers. I didn't use those very much yet. We're working on a pond project at my dad's farm this summer, so I think that's where we'll be able to pump some water from for the winter. That's where those de-icers I think will come in much more handy, and we can get them, because that's a big barrier for us is, okay, well, we don't have water access where we could graze cover crops or corn stalks. So I think those will play a big part, even if we have to haul water, we're not going to get frozen. And then insulators, power links, gate handles, and water tanks. So the Electronet, I got Permanet, which is more durable, thicker posts. It drives in, or it's meant for more permanent grazing arrangements. We ran out of regular Electronet, so we ended up having to use some of that for our goats, and that was just kind of a pain for one person. It's a pain for one person to pick up and take out, and so it's heavy, and I didn't really need the additional security it provides. I think it's 48 inches tall. So with Juno in there, I shouldn't need any taller net than what I have. I also tried some of the braided rope. For me, it's a little thicker than what I prefer, the twine, and so it sags a lot more. You can't get it as tight. You don't get as much distance out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'll use it as around the perimeter of that small patch, and I'm gonna run it along the permanent fence so that I can just hook into it, and I don't need a solar energizer over there. I can put a plug-in one in, and then I can just link it to my twine. The step-in posts are definitely worth spending the money on the better quality ones, because I guess just like with anything, might as well spend the money on something better. And yeah, the ones I put in the picture is my favorite so far. So in PFI, I've gone to field days, and then I'm also in the savings incentive program right now, and then grazing cost share and cover crops cost share. So it really it helps with money, resources, and advice. I just really there's always someone that if I have a question, I can email them and they're going to get back to me in a timely fashion. if I have any questions over this. So the grazing cost share, really anything that would promote rotational grazing is kind of on that list. So fencing, energizers. I got some water tubs, and poultry tractors. I really enjoyed, I had a grazing consultation along with that. And that was nice to have someone to kind of have a different outlook on what you're doing and just some different ideas. And so this cost share made all the difference in me being able to really jump in to rotational grazing. Whereas if I hadn't gotten it, I definitely wouldn't have been able to start off as heavy as I did in rotational grazing. And I can already just, especially like I said in my goats, I can already see the benefits that it holds, that rotational grazing holds for small ruminants, especially in the pastures. I'll see this year what it does for the cows. The savings incentive program, I really like the networking opportunities, especially when I was at the annual conference in January. We had like a little dinner, we sat together at dinner. So it's a 2-year program with a lot of mentorship. We had business development meetings that were very helpful and kind of educational. A business plan is required, and then a savings match at the end. So the mentorship, you're aligned with a mentor that kind of is doing the same, trying to do the same thing as you are. And it's just another opportunity to learn what other people are doing, which I find very valuable. The cover crop cost share, there's a kind of a difference in payment versus or relating to the record keeping that you're wanting to do and the documentation. So what I did with this is I drilled seed into a pasture that I had got the cows to kind of grub down on, and then I had a drone apply some over a cornfield. We had nice rain all summer, and then it kind of shut off on us. So nothing grew very well. You can see here, I think this is a forage pea. I did a mix on green cover seed. So those I think those are the peas. Those actually did pretty well last fall. But again, we didn't get the rain, and then we got a frost shortly after once we did start getting some more rain. So the deer probably were happy to find these little tidbits. For this year, I'm going to get some pasture turkeys. I'm excited about this. This is just something different for me. Continue experimenting and implementing cover crops. I don't have a lot of row crop acres, but I'm getting my dad converted to using them a little more and trying to get him to experiment. Increase overall efficiency. There are things that from an operation my size, maybe I don't really, it doesn't make sense for me to spend the money on it. But if I can have a full-time job as long as I can, it will kind of my thoughts are it will set me up for more success later. So if I can be a little more efficient now, that will help me down the road. Better work-life balance. I'm sure everybody on here knows all about that. If you figured it out, let me know. But yeah, I think everybody knows that farms or has a small business or anything, that it's hard to it's hard to hit that work-life balance. And for me, at least, you almost feel guilty when you're not working. So I think trying to get that sorted out would be is a goal for me. And then like I said earlier, I'd like to try swath grazing. At Iowa State, I kind of heard a little bit about it, and then a guy I worked for a couple summers ago, he's doing it, and they've done it for a couple years, and it's worked out well for them, I think. I guess the main purpose of this slide for me is, I think it's critical for you to go out, or for people, if you can, to work on other farms, because I grew up on my dad's farm. He's got beef cattle and row crops. It's very commercial. So being able to go, this is Mosier Angus. I went there. They do a lot more there are some registered, and then they just are a lot more record keeping, and just a very, very organized and clean and neat place to work. And also just, this was probably my biggest, like, this was just a very nice place to work. Huge personal development for me. And that was over one summer. So I think finding people that are in your corner and you could call them for advice or to kind of bounce ideas off of, I think is huge. And just, yeah, getting different experience from different farms is very good, to just kind of broaden your horizons and kind of just turn your wheels on what you want to change, if you're returning to a family farm, or just different ideas if you're starting out from scratch. These are some helpful resources I've found. A lot of them are Iowa State related. Ag Decision Maker is great. There's lots of, so for cattle, there's one that's like confinement, extended grazing, or kind of like your typical graze part of the year, and then stored feeds the other part of the year. So that's, and they have stuff, I don't know for like the specialty crops, I know they're getting more, but for your run-of-the-mill products, they are a great resource. The Iowa State cash rental rates, that I was mentioning earlier for pasture, there's pasture, row crop, there's like corn stalks, rates, I think it's broken down per county or per region. The Iowa Beef Center, they have a lot of great articles on things like, just like the swath grazing I was talking about, or grazing cover crops, or just little bits and pieces, little in their short reads, some of them. So that kind of, if you've only got a few minutes and you just want to kind of hit the headlines, that's great. And then green cover seed is what I use for my cover crop mixes. I have a lot of fun using their custom mix maker. You just have a few details you put in, and then it spits out kind of what plants are going to have better odds than others to come up and grow for you. So with that, are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Olivia. Yes, there are some questions coming in here, and for everyone watching, please keep tossing out your questions. We'll make sure to get to them. First question is, can you describe your portable water setup? Stacy is getting some goats next month.
Yes. Okay. This is the other thing. I was terrible at taking pictures last year. So I don't have a picture of it. So I have, in the back of my truck, I just have it used to be a chemical tank. If you see those white tanks that are kind of in those cages, it's a mini bulk. So it's about half the size of the typical ones you see. So I just washed it out good. And then, yeah, I just have that in the back of my truck, filled it up, and it lasted me quite a while, just because sheep and goats, the goats especially, we've found do not drink a lot of water at all. So it'll last quite a while. Just a tank like that will last quite a while. I know sometimes if you're going to leave them kind of in one central location, you could just take one of those tanks, and you can, if you know if you have like a local chemical dealer, I don't think I even paid I didn't pay anything for mine. I think you can get them for free if they want to get rid of them. So if you just stack those up on some pallets or something, just to get obviously the gravity to work for you, that's another option with those.
Thanks for that, Olivia. Question here from Zach, wondering what the pricing per foot of the fencing is.
Oh, 1 second here. I actually have a catalog right here I can look at. So did he say which fence?
Did not specify.
Okay. I'll look at the net and so if you get Premier's catalog, you can order it. That's very helpful. It has lots of comparisons that I can explain a lot better, or that the catalog can explain a lot better than I can. So let's see, the IntelliBraid twine, which is what I use for my cows, for a 1/4 mile long is $56. So I guess whatever math that would be. And then the net, if he's wondering about that, I think I pay like $168 or something for a roll, and there are different size rolls you can get. Here. Let's see if I can find it in here. Okay. The 42-inch electronet here, and it all depends. You can get a lot of different varieties of the net. There's some that are positive, negative, so those are better in sandy soils, rocky soils where there's a little less of a ground that you can achieve with the ground rod. There's single spike, double spike. So the basic one that I use is that's a 164-foot roll, and that's $162.
That math is a little easier than the other one.
Yes, for sure.
Uh, Ethan has a question about your leases. Are your leases year to year or longer term?
So that's a good question. So my regular cash rent for my cattle, it's on a year-to-year basis because this was the first year we had it. So I think we're looking for a more 3-year lease, is what kind of we've been talking, me and the executor of the estate have been talking about. But so yeah, so that one is year to year for now, but it should be at least like a 5 or 6 year deal is kind of what his thoughts were. The pasture for my sheep, that one is kind of, we have a written contract, but I guess we haven't even done one for this year. That reminds me, but that's more of a verbal deal. I've never even met the guy. I've just texted him and asked him stuff. The exchanges, that's like where for the advertising, that's kind of a year-to-year thing. He's talked about getting some sheep and goats of his own, but the neighboring farm there, it's just a few acres, but he said, yeah, bring them back over this year and I don't have to pay anything for it. It's nice and it's right there. The orchard, yes, that's probably going to be a continual deal. And then the grazing after a small grain crop, that kind of just depends on where we have water access, where it would hook into some of my dad's pastures. Because again, water is kind of the hang up when it comes to the cattle a lot.
A follow-up to that, of these different styles of agreements, is there one that you prefer?
Oh, um, obviously like I love collaboration. So if I can work with my neighbors um on I guess a fertilizer exchange for feed exchange for me, that's great. Or if I can say, hey, I'll pay for the cover crop seed and the application if I can graze my cows on it. So they're getting the benefits of cover crops and the cattle manure. And I'm obviously getting the grazing benefits from that. I kind of like the creativity, I guess, of the adjusted cash rent. It's kind of more bargaining, I guess. Um, so and so, yeah, I think any of the bottom four are just more interesting than just, oh, let's see what Iowa State says you should be paying. So yeah, I think I like any of the ones that allow for some wiggle room and just really working with whoever you're going to be grazing for.
Very cool. Uh, Another question from the chat here. Do goats or sheep clear pasture better?
So I would say for the goats definitely do a better job on your shrubby stuff. The sheep will get in there and nibble on it some, but the goats are definitely going to make the biggest difference when you have trees and shrubs and everything. So if I had to pick between co-grazing cattle and sheep or cattle and goats, I'm definitely going to go for the goats. But the sheep definitely have their place. There's still weeds that they really love to eat, and they'll still nibble on some trees and shrubs. So I would say the goats probably overall do a better job, but the sheep definitely have their place. The sheep are usually less independent as well, which is helpful. My goats and the sheep are pretty well bucket trained, but the goats have a mind of their own and they like to, if they want to get out, they're going to find a way. Is kind of how that goes. So if you're looking for maybe something a little less uh problematic, the sheep are definitely where to start.
Do you graze them together ever?
They were together, the sheep and goats were together for a short time last year. I don't really want to do the flirt situation for a long time, just because for like mineral needs and everything. Um, and ideally I would kind of run the cows through and then the sheep and the goats. The goats would be more targeted, but run them more in a cycle rather than together, I guess, so that the cows can consume some of the parasite load that the sheep and goats leave behind.
Another question from the chat here. Why are you considering doing pasture raised turkey over pasture raised chicken? And then kind of follow up to that is what are the markets like near you for grass fed products?
Okay, that's a great question. So I kind of want to do the pasture raised turkey because totally forgot to give to talk about this. So I attended a field day at West Fork Farmstead here. I think it was 3 summers ago, 2 or 3 summers ago at this point. And I was wanting to get into the sheep. And I prefer grass fed lamb over grain fed lamb. I think it's just grain fed lamb to me just kind of tastes like weird beef sometimes. But when it's grass fed, it really has its own distinct flavor. So I wanted to get into that because that's a product they didn't have, and they have the markets, and they're just a very nice family to be around. Um, and uh, and so the turkeys, they are already do pasture chickens, and I thought the turkeys are just something different. Hopefully predation is a little less of an issue. We've growing up, we just had a terrible time with raccoons and everything. So hopefully the turkeys are a little less. I'm planning to find a way to run them with the lambs, so that they can the lambs are kind of a little bit of protection, not, just by presence, I guess.
A question here from Ross. You have a lot of enterprises. Which do you like most? Okay, a couple questions here from Ross. You have a lot of enterprises. Which do you like most? Which do you think would be the best business to expand? And how are you currently selling or marketing your beef?
Okay. I realized I forgot to talk about the marketing in my area. I'll do that quickly. The grass-fed market is not huge in Washington itself, I don't think, but our surrounding areas there's definitely some promise there. So I guess back to Ross's question, my favorite, I don't, they all have, I feel like I like the cattle just because that's what I grew up with, and they're just like gentle giants, I guess. Um, so and that's what, yeah, I just have a soft spot for them. My goats they're also, a lot of them are very friendly. So another soft spot. But they also, I feel like, get a lot of bang for my buck. They can thrive off of stuff that nothing else is going to eat. And it's just going to take me more time and inputs, um, to get rid of all the multiflora rows or whatever's out there. So if I don't have to go out and spray, um, that's great for me, and I can sell a product off of that grazing. Uh, the sheep, I uh, I like the number of sheep I have. I don't want to have a ton of sheep in my uh, lifetime. I'm planning on kind of growing the sheep as I can sell it grass fed. Kind of that be my limiting factor. And they're great for stuff like this orchard where it's a lot of grass. So, and even if I did have net up for goats in there to graze the grass, I would not trust them to not be reaching for those trees every time. So they both, I guess, have their place in my operation. So the market for the beef, so the spring calves, Dad has a friend that buys those in I think in January. So they're 7 months old. Well, they'd be more than that, but yeah, his spring calves go to a friend into his feedlot, and then we're real close to Kelowna. So our fall calves typically go there. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna do like one calf for myself Hopefully I just need half of beef. But we don't do freezer beef or anything. I hope that hit all the questions. Yes.
Yeah, you remembered them perfectly. Uh, Ethan wonders, how many volts are you typically putting out with your fencer for sheep and goats?
Ooh, okay. Very largely dependent on how much net you have. So the general rule of thumb for sheep, goats, and cattle is you want 3,000 volts running through your fence as a minimum. More is better. So you can see in this picture here, there's a lot of tall grass. That's going to drag the voltage down plenty. So ideally you would mow the strips, every strip that you're going to put net on. I'm not going to do that. Just because that takes, or that's just extra time for me to take. So yeah, 3,000 is kind of the bare minimum you want, and it's just dependent on the number of nets you have hooked up, your size of fencer, and if you're gonna for the cattle, it's obviously easier because you're just having that single strand, and you're probably not gonna have grass or weeds that are gonna reach that tall to drag down any of the voltage. Whereas with the net, you're down in the grass. The bottom line is not electrified, so that helps. But yeah, it's just 3,000 is the bare minimum that you want. Anything above that is my goal, I guess. And the sheep and goats and the cows, you don't obviously want to rely on it, but once they learn what the net and what the wire is, they really won't push it. They'll just learn that it's gonna, if they touch it, it's gonna shock them. So yeah, don't rely on that. But if you don't have a fencer for a day for whatever reason, you're probably going to be fine.
Pamela wonders if you have any difficulties moving the livestock from place to place.
Um, yeah, the cattle are typically they kind of sat in their pastures. They don't get moved very much. Getting the sheep and goats on the stock trailer is harder, just because they can squirt under, or they're just they're harder, to have. You have to have a different setup, I guess, and you have to have a nice little corral to really do it right and get them into the trailer. And you'll get some to follow you in with a bucket, and then they'll run out. And especially the sheep, they're very just a big flocking instinct. So once one starts to run, the others will. Uh, but usually, like if they would get out of the net, they do a pretty good job. Usually, the sheep and the goats are following a bucket, or if I just kind of be patient with them and take my time, they'll get back into where we want them to be. And that's what I'm with Timber, kind of, or yeah, my border collie is make life a little easier. So if I think, oh no, the goats and the sheep are out, I know I have Timber, and that's going to take a lot of stress off of me as far as worrying about that. So
Stacy wonders about a leader follower system with the poultry after the ruminants come through for things like parasite control.
yes, I would love, so I'd love any insight that anyone, I have my contact information on the end, but any insight on that would be great because it's my first year. I'd like to do something like that. I'm just trying to figure out, I'd like to enclose everything in net so that that's just kind of an extra layer of protection. And then if my turkey tractor is not as tight as I would like, they're a little safer because they've got the net. But yeah, any insight with that? Yeah, that would be great to be able to follow them up.
Another question from Stacy. I'm up in northern New York. Thanks for joining us today, Stacy. How do you handle fencing in winter with accumulated snow?
Okay, I have not yet used net. Let's see. I haven't used any electronet that's been in the snow yet. I will hopefully this year, grazing cover crops and such. It should do fine. I guess I don't know how much snow is accumulated snow. But there's I have not do not have personal experience with a ton of snow. And typically like when at work we had a big storm, and the sheep don't really want to mess with it either, mess with the fence either when if it's going to be that snowy. It's not something that they put a lot of pressure against when we did have a lot of snow, I guess. I don't know. That's not a great answer, but I don't have a lot of experience with it.
Do you have a guess, just to give a frame of reference, about how much snow you typically deal with? Like, what is a big snow for you?
I think we had one this year that was 6 or 8 inches, and I don't think there was anything for it to accumulate on top of. So that's all we, and a lot, it seems like or the last couple of years, whenever we get a big snow, it tends to leave pretty quick. It doesn't, we don't see that accumulation sticking around for very long.
There's a question here about training animals to respect hot wire. How do you do it?
Okay. I found with the sheep and goats, have them with their mothers. I mean, the biggest thing is make sure the training time period is when you really want your fence to be as hot as you can make it. So, and this sounds bad, but sometimes it's kind of fun to watch because you'll have a little goat that just trots up to the fence and sticks its nose out, and you'll know when they get shocked, and they'll just bleat and they'll run away. But definitely just keep an eye on them, because the younger ones are gonna, sometimes their first instinct is to jump forward, and then they're going to be tangled in the net. So that's the main thing, is just be there to watch. And it really only takes like let them out for a while when you can watch them, put them back in, let them out, maybe the next day. It really doesn't take long at all for them to learn. Kind of the same thing with my guard dog had to learn, and I wasn't watching her, and you could tell when she got shocked, and she didn't want to go back out very much for a little bit. But then they figure it out. With the cows, the ones I bought, and yeah, the ones I bought, I knew had been exposed to hot wire before, and so my dad uses just like regular smooth electric wire, so the cows are trained to that. And I think with the braided twine is a lot more visible, so I think that really helps. But the cows, I guess I've never been around a group of cows that has never seen hot wire. Um, but usually with dad's heifers, he'll just put a line up in their lot so that they can go check it out, and they'll learn. It doesn't take them very long. But yeah, the biggest thing is just make sure it's hot and make sure you're around in case, especially with the net, the young get caught entangled.
Question here from Jody. Do you feed 20% protein tubs just during winter or all year?
So that was just when I fed hay. So, and I think when they were out on corn stalks, I also gave them those protein tubs, because I weaned my fall calves, or I think I weaned my fall calves in December. So their nutrition, to be lactating at that time, I was a little nervous. So I went ahead and fed them some while they were on the corn stalks. Uh, but the hay that we took off was pretty mature. So it was just while I feed hay, while they were on corn stalks, they got the protein tubs as well. But yeah, I don't feed it all year round.
We've got just a couple more questions in the chat, but we have a few more minutes, so folks, feel free to keep tossing in questions if you have them. Another from Jody here. What seed mix do you use for pasture? And then also, what is swath grazing? Can you speak more to
Oh,
that?
for sure. So the seed mix, I've never totally reseeded a pasture. The one that I drilled in was more of a cover crop mix, so it had like rye, oats, triticale, winter wheat. It had like some random like sunflower, hairy vetch, that kind of thing. And then swath grazing. So around, I think the main crops people use are oats and millet. So what they'll do is in the spring they'll put oats in, and then they'll take them off as hay, and then they'll follow it and drill millet. I think pearl millet is kind of the standard for what people will use. So they'll drill the millet in, and depending on the rain you get and the weather, you can take a cutting off of that, and you just got to cut it high enough that it will regrow. And then, so you let it sit, let it sit, let it sit. And then right before you get kind of a big snow is ideal. You'll mow it, and with just like a mower conditioner, and you put it in tight swaths, coming out the back of the mower. So then what the snow does is the snow comes down and it acts as kind of a refrigerator. So that's why you want cold temperatures in the snow, so you don't get spoilage from it sitting and being wet. And then, yeah, the snow just covers it. You can turn the cows out and you just kind of strip graze them back through the swaths, and they'll dig through the snow to find them. I guess there is a depth of snow and ice that they can't get through, but yeah, they just dig through the snow to find those swaths and they just graze on them. So it's just like hay sitting, except you didn't have to rake or bale or take it back out to them.
You had mentioned earlier that you added legumes to this orchard pasture. What what kind of legumes was in that?
So in this one, I just overseeded it with a high sugar grass mix, and then it was bird's foot trefoil.
Uh, uh, we are bumping up here at 1. I'll just sit another minute in case there are any last minute questions. But in the meantime, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it, and thank you, Olivia, for taking the time to share everything you've been working on. Um, and I'm not seeing anything else, so we'll go ahead and call it. All right, everyone. Hope you have a good spring day and good luck with the grazing season.
Yes, thank you for coming, everyone.